Good evening and welcome to the 2D podcast, proudly brought to you by GAN Asphalt and Concrete. Much to get to tonight as Brock Purdy has helped the 49ers to 2 wins. Are they going on a deep playoff run? Are they better with Brock Purdy? Micah Parsons is questioning whether Jalen Hurts is really the reason why the Eagles are having success. Is it Jalen Hurts? Is it the team around him? Kyler Murray suffered a knee injury. Is this why you don't draft quarterbacks that run? Baker Mayfield shocks the world and gets a win on Thursday night, comes from behind. Does he still have a future in this league? The Dolphins have dropped 2 in a row. Are they getting exposed by the NFL? Are they in big trouble going in this week against the Buffalo Bills? Cowboys, a lot of people think they're the second best team in the NFC. Dak Prescott not playing like necessarily a guy that deserves $45 million a year. What does this mean for their Super Bowl chances? The Lions, I don't know who to call them, Eric Eager's Lions or Jeff Chadiha's Lions, are red hot. They're now just 1 game away from 500 after a 1-6 start. Is Dan Campbell actually the coach of the year in the NFL? And the Bills, after flirting with Odell Beckham Jr., eventually signed back Cole Beasley. Does this mean there are problems for the Buffalo Bills?
They gave him a shot.
Yeah, they gave him a shot. What are we looking at for Week 15? It's all right here on the 2 Deep Podcast.
This is the 2 Deep NFL Podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the National Football League, breaking down the NFL like no one else can. 2 Deep is hosted by Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro. Jeff is a senior columnist and on-air personality for the NFL Network and NFL.com. Eric is the senior VP of Research and Development for Sumer Sports. Soren Petro is the host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. 2 Deep Podcast is proudly brought to you by GAN Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at ganasphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. GAN Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here are your hosts, Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro.
Back at it here on a Wednesday night. If you're catching us via the podcast, remember you can always catch us live Wednesday nights, 9 p.m. Central, when you can catch us live. You heard it, Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network. Eric Eager, Sumer Sports. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. And let's start with the Niners, Jeff. Brock Purdy. Right? We all knew it. Mr. Irrelevant. This would be the key to a deep playoff run. Are you buying Brock Purdy now as you see what he's doing with the 49ers so far?
Well, look, I like Brock Purdy. I like the story. I think we should pump the brakes on the guy who threw for 185 yards against a lot of practice squad players. The Buccaneers had like no starters in their secondary for that game. But I like the 49ers overall, and I like what he brings to them as in the role he's playing. I mean, he's certainly more mobile than Garoppolo, and you've heard their players talk about that escapability and knowing there's another play coming when his first play dies. But, this team is really built around the supporting cast on offense, the George Kittles, the Deebo Samuel. When Deebo Samuel comes back, he'll be back in the mix, Ayuk, McCaffrey, and that defense. And I just have a hard time, again, believing that Brock Purdy is not going to be put into a situation against the Dallas Cowboys or the Philadelphia Eagles, both of whom have the 2 best pass defenses in the NFL, a lot of Pro Bowl corners and safeties back there, great pass rushes. I just feel at some point he's going to have to throw a pass that matters in a meaningful game, and it may not go the way people would think right now based on what we've seen from him. I like the kid. I know Garoppolo is, gets beaten up sometimes for the way he plays and what he's done, but he won a lot of games there. But I just think that with a backup quarterback, a third-string quarterback, by the way, it's just a hard road to go for the 49ers.
By the way, can we just real quick tip off the fact that, first of all, is Jeff wearing a hat? Will Eric have combed his hair?
Yeah.
Me wearing a Syracuse sweatshirt. Like I said, if you join us for the live stream, you can see us. I am wearing a Syracuse sweatshirt. Jeff is not wearing a hat, and Eric doesn't own a comb, I think is what we decided a little bit ago. Also, I'm a no-go on this one. Anybody with a bet?
I did have some wine.
Yeah. I've got lemonade. Lemonade and water.
I've got iced tea and water, so I can't say I'm in for the cocktail tonight. Eric, how about it? Like, how serious should we take Brock Purdy with the Niners? How much does it matter, Jimmy Garoppolo to Brock Purdy?
Well, I think with respect to the NFC, I don't think it matters that much, right? Because the number one quarterback in the NFC right now is probably Dak Prescott, right? As far as like, if you're going to say who's the best, who would you rather have? Then I think it's Jalen Hurts. From there, right? Like the fourth best team in the NFC is the Lions, and they have Jared Goff at quarterback. I'm dead ass, right? Like the sports book in Vegas that Soren and I were at over the summer, they have the Lions as the 10th best team in the NFL in their power rankings. And then, Vikings have Cousins, Giants have Daniel Jones, Washington has Taylor Heineke. Who else am I missing? The Seattle has Geno Smith, who's played really well this year, but I don't know if they're going to make it given their schedule. So coming out of the NFC, Soren, I don't think it matters that much. They could probably make it to the conference title game without Brock Purdy really being an eyesore relative to the other quarterback in the game. Can they win the Super Bowl? I kind of agree with Jeff. I think at some point, much like with Jimmy Garoppolo is playing quarterback for that team, he's going to have to make a throw, and it's going to be very apparent that he's not of that caliber.
Yeah. Is the bigger question, can they survive without Deebo Samuel? It's one thing winning with Brock Purdy when you have a healthy Deebo Samuel. They got good news. He's not going to be that. That was an ugly looking injury. It could have certainly been a lot worse. Is the bigger question Deebo Samuel than whichever one of the two guys? Because is there really that much difference between Purdy and Garoppolo, right? I mean, they don't ask a lot of either one of them. So, we're going to talk about Jalen Hurts and the team around him. The team around the quarterback seems to be the subject matter that you focus on, Jeff, and they lost, their most dynamic weapon.
They did, and I think not just that, but as I said before, Tampa Bay's defense is a mess right now. And the Dolphins not too far behind, by the way, what they got going on in their secondary, their lack of a pass rush. So he's gotten a nice jump start on a career facing two defenses that are not going to give him nearly the kind of problems that I just mentioned with the Cowboys and Eagles. And again, the kid looks like a player. I mean, I don't want to take anything away from what he's doing because the poise is there. The mobility is a huge factor for him. But yeah, I don't think losing Deebo is that big a deal because Kyle Shanahan is really good at adjusting his offense. I think if they lose Christian McCaffrey, like that's a big deal for them. If you're talking about anybody going away from that offense, like he's the guy who's giving them a lot more options, both as a runner and as a receiver. But I don't agree with Eric. I think that there's I think if you're trying to keep up with what Philadelphia has on offense and what Dallas can do with their run game, even though Dak's not playing that great, I think having to play under pressure for a Brock Purdy would be a different story than what he's doing right now. Those defenses he just saw are not going to give him nearly the kind of problems that those other teams will on defense.
Yeah. By the way, this one's good. Kevin, McCaffrey and Kittle have to be confused that they're not the injury concerns. No, they're not. That's usually where it is. Listen, I've been told by a couple of people in the NFL, I'm sure you guys have been told similar things just about how good a play caller Kyle Shanahan is. But I think you do need weapons. I think the Deebo Samuel one is big, right? I think that I don't think it slows their momentum on getting into the playoffs. I think they'll get there, and if he's healthy when he gets there, then they're in good shape. But I think Deebo is maybe the most important piece. You need somebody to certainly play point guard, but Debo's a big loss. Igor, how much do you think it affects the 49ers as far as where they stack up at the top of the NFC?
Yeah, I think offensive weapons concern, Debo's a top 10 player in the whole league, right? As far as value. So I think it hurts them a lot. I think, tomorrow night against Seattle, like that's a team that, the odds makers, when they found out that Brock Purdy was the quarterback, they made that game a pick 'em in Seattle. And now it's a 3.5 point spread. Some sharps have come in and bet Seattle. But like it could show up even tomorrow, right? Like Seattle doesn't have a great defense, and the run game, to Jeff's point, I think will carry the 49ers tomorrow because Seattle's terrible in the run game. But if Seattle gets lucky and stops a few early down runs and you have to get some plays by Brock Purdy, like without Samuel out there, it's hard. I mean, Samuel was a 1,400-yard receiver last year. We talk about him as a running back, but he had like Tyreek Hill type numbers as a wide receiver. So it hurts them a lot. And he's the one guy that, he's averaging depending on the year, like 9-10 yards after the catch. Like it's just an absolute unicorn for them. So it hurts them. And they have some things to spare. You'd much rather be the 2 seed than the 3 seed. And the Vikings look weak, and that they could certainly catch them, but they just need one more win. Well, if they win tomorrow, they win the division, right? So like they could just kind of like win tomorrow and kind of pack it in for a while. But I do think, especially given the fact that after the 5 seed, which will probably be Dallas, the teams that the 2 and 3 seeds play in this conference are not going to be hard teams. So I think from the perspective of the Niners, the Samuel thing hurts them, but not as much as it would if it had happened at a different time.
Yeah, busy days going on there, no doubt. Everything okay here?
Yeah, like my wife had a party, and like I'm literally texting her now, like, can we not
not have the party?
Well, like the kids came too, and I'm like, I was doing my podcast with Thomas earlier in the day, and I'm literally calling her phone and like I don't know. I feel like we have a big enough house, and
Yeah. Can I just have my one corner of it? I know.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Micah Parsons, Jeff, popping off. Whether Jalen Hurts is the real reason for the Eagles' success, or if it's the team that's built around him. Is that, number one, a wise thing to be saying? And number two, does he have a point?
I don't understand the Cowboys, because they were talking a lot before they played the Eagles the first time, and it got bad in a hurry. They aren't even playing the Eagles this week.
I know.
And they're already talking about what's going to happen here. No, he doesn't have a point. And I like the point he's trying to make was the point you could have made in week 3 or week 4 to say, well, I don't believe in Jalen Hurts, or just the A.J. Brown factor, or the Miles Sanders. Those guys are doing the heavy lifting. We're down to the point where we got 3 games left in the season, right? And so you feel like, dude, he's shown enough. Like his numbers back up the MVP discussion. You've got the highest rated passer in the league. You've got the guy who's got the second most touchdowns in the league. You've got a guy who's the first quarterback in NFL history to have 10 rushing touchdowns in back-to-back seasons. And by the way, it's like you lost him the first time. And so I get that the Cowboys defense has been really good all season, and they're feeling themselves and thinking that, okay, that they got one more shot at trying to catch this team and trying to make some noise in the NFC East before this is over. But Eagles are going to win this division. Hurts unless he falls apart, is winning the MVP. And Micah Parsons, as great as he is, you got to if you don't win this game, you go 0 for 2 after all the crap they've talked this year. What does it say about them? I mean, at the end of the day, Jalen Hurts is everything that people are saying he is.
Yeah, it is never good for bulletin board material, and I had the exact same thought that Brad had, Eric. I quickly had to remind myself I knew the game against the Eagles was next week, but he said, Eric, call the upset. Jacksonville is beating the Cowboys. If it's ever been more crystal clear that you're not focused on the opponent at hand, and while Jacksonville isn't one of the top teams in the league, they've proven to be a dangerous team. I mean, we can get into whether or not what Micah Parsons said is true, but is this the dumbest move ever? And are you all over the Jaguars?
Yeah, I think in this particular game, like, for one, I think the Jacksonville Jaguars are winning the AFC South. Like, I think that they only have to make up one game on Tennessee the next 3 games, and then they win at home against them coming in there. But insofar as this game, I mean, the only thing that I think hurts the Jaguars bet here is the fact that the Cowboys already had their stinker. They had the Dak. Well, I call them the Dak privilege games, where Dak like goes from being a great quarterback to looking like, he looks terrible in games like that. Like, I think they'll be focused in this one more so than in most games. But I believe, this game is going to be tough, and sharp bettors have loved the Jaguars here. 6.5 was their opening spread. And it's been bet down all the way to 4 in some spots. So I think that people are grabbing the value on the Jaguars coming up here.
Yeah, I listen. Is it? What do you think about whether or not what he's stating is true? Is this just kind of a Jimmy Garoppolo type season for Jalen Hurts, that he's riding a really good team around him with a really good coaching staff that's putting him in position to succeed, and he is, for lack of a better term, just playing point guard and not really quarterbacking the team, and the team, riding on his shoulders? I mean, how would you describe it? More Hurts, more team?
I think the fact that Hurts can really run the football really helps him. So that is certainly a thing that Garoppolo doesn't have going for him. So I certainly think it's that way, and not necessarily completely a Jimmy Garoppolo thing.
What about Jeff? I agree. The running part of the equation, which we're going to talk about here in a minute a little bit more, is what makes him so dynamic, because he is a tremendous runner, but he is spinning the ball. I mean, especially here of late, the touchdown total early on, he really wasn't throwing that many touchdowns. Yeah, I think, he wasn't Zach Wilson, because he was doing everything else accurately, and he was moving the chains and being successful, and the offense was scoring points, but he wasn't really putting in the end zone. That has changed, Jeff. I mean, yeah. I think, is he Patrick Mahomes equal? Should he be talked about with Josh Allen? I mean, I think he should be talked about, as we've discussed before, in the MVP discussion. Maybe he's not there because he doesn't have the body of work, but he's playing at that level right now. I think Micah Parsons is barking up the wrong tree.
Well, and look, I remember back in the days when Tom Brady was coming of age, and I'm not comparing Jalen Hurts to Tom Brady as a player, but I will say a lot of people thought, this guy isn't the real thing. He's not doing this. Look at all the defense. Look at Belichick, all this stuff. And it took about 6 or 7 years until people took him seriously. If you really watch Tom Brady play, he was doing things at a young age that showed you that he had the potential to be a great player, and he had a coach who brought that out of him. And I'm seeing the same thing with Jalen Hurts. I don't ding him for having a coach who's smart enough to play to his strengths, or an organization that's smart enough to put good people around him as a young player on a rookie contract, because every team in the NFL who's smart does that. Chiefs did it. Bills are doing it. The Bengals are doing it. It's pretty much become the norm for teams to understand that, hey, let's load up. Let's give our young quarterback some weapons and see what happens. And so the key is whether the quarterback delivers when he has that kind of supporting cast around him. And Jalen Hurts was playing pretty well last year. I think the throwing part is what's come along, but he had pretty good numbers. He ran an offense that was a changeup, was a creative move to get that team to win some games. But when he played the Chiefs last year, I was in shock about the things he was doing early on in that game. And you look at his stats in that game; they're pretty impressive. So yeah, I don't think it's right to say, oh my God, he's having this great season. Look what's around him. Patrick Mahomes had a 5,000-yard season, and he had a ton of weapons around him. Yeah, and so that's how I look at it.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we'll find out if one day he has the kind of season Mahomes is having now, and one of his best weapons leaves. But this is smart. This is just a page out of exactly how the Chiefs, made sure that they got success with Patrick Mahomes, and what every team should do. If you can have every other thing in place, then drop the quarterback in the middle of it. Have good blocking. Check. Eagles have a tremendous offensive line. Give him some weapons. He had a couple of good weapons. They added Devonta Smith, the Heisman Trophy winning wideout last year, and then double down and got A.J. Brown. I mean, this is just smart team building and making sure that you can get the answers you need about the quarterback right away. I don't, Micah Parsons can say whatever he wants, but Jalen Hurts is completely outplaying Dak Prescott, who we'll get to in a minute. But, maybe you ought to, look around your own, locker room before you start firing things off. The running quarterback, Kyler Murray, goes down. I've long been a proponent. I love a quarterback that can run. I know how much pressure defensive coordinators always tell you. It's the first thing you got to ask yourself. Is the quarterback a threat to run? And if he is, then you got to allocate resources to stop that part of the equation. But you expose yourself to a lot more hits. I know this wasn't a hit; it was a non-contact injury, but I don't think he'd had it if he was standing in the pocket. Eric, what's the conclusion to take away from Kyler Murray, and what's the rest of the career look like if he's going to start losing the wheels already?
And we already saw Steve Keim went on leave. We hope he's okay, health related leave. But that was always the risk, right? Like the hardest thing in sports, in my opinion, is determining whether or not a quarterback who's effective on a rookie deal can be effective off the rookie deal. Once you take away $40 million of surplus around him, can he be effective there? Murray so far this year, not really. And a lot of that's because he hasn't been running, right? Like if you actually look at, Kyler Murray's like sort of, Kyler Murray's basically his like usage there, like he stopped running so much last year, I believe. Actually this year he actually has run a little bit about the same, but like the last 2 years he had 819 rushing yards in 2020, just a little over 400 each of the last 2 years. He's been more effective this year, just 68 carries. He had 88 last year, 133 in 2020. So you've seen it reduce a little bit, and it's just a matter of like whether or not you're willing to put up with that risk. Like I personally think you should, if you're a running quarterback, you should run. And I think like one of the things that like Russell Wilson, even though we saw it against the Chiefs a little bit, Dak Prescott and guys like that, like once they get that big money deal, they stop running and it takes away some of their effectiveness. But you see the other side of it, which is the fact that you're going to take hits or you're going to be, simply in a position to get injured more often. And that, of course, is a problem.
Yeah. Jeff, is this, what is this, a cautionary tale? Like quarterbacks are hard to find. And if you find one that can throw well and run well, that's a big threat. I would never worry about taking a quarterback like that, but don't you have to worry about the kind of extension they gave Kyler Murray because of the hits they do subject themselves to?
Yeah, I think if you're going to have that style of quarterback, you better have what the Ravens have right now, which is a quarterback who can run some of the same stuff if the first guy goes down. Now, I know they're on the third guy now in Baltimore right now, depending on how Tyler Huntley does. But the scary thing about what's happening with Arizona is that they are so bought in. Like they hired Cliff Kingsbury to run this offense. They drafted this quarterback to run this offense. And the quarterback he's about 5-6 inches shorter than Lamar Jackson to begin with. And so he's got a very specific skill set. And so when he went down, my first reaction was, okay, well, you just gave him about $170 million. You just signed the coach to an extension. You just signed the GM to an extension. Like, what does this team look like next season? Because he's not going to be playing probably next year at all. Like, and the backup's Colt McCoy. And so, yeah, it's a huge concern. And it's a huge concern for him going forward because he probably won't be able to play with that same level of electricity moving forward with that kind of injury. Now, I know he's young and I know players can do it, but he was already trending away from that kind of player, as Eric said, with the numbers, the way he was running the football. It's hard to see him sitting in the pocket and being Drew Brees. And so that to me is the bigger question when you have that kind of quarterback, because eventually they all have to transition into being better passers because they can't run forever. And if they don't do that, they have very short careers. And that's what I look at with this situation. It's I don't want to say you ever want to have an ACL injury as a quarterback or as a running quarterback or any player, but you probably want to have it in September and not have it happen in December because of the way it's going to impact. They're going to lose him for a whole season. Yeah. I don't know what their game plan is because Kingsbury is not a great coach without that kind of player. He wasn't a great coach with him, but he at least won some games. But yeah, they're in a really bad place as an organization.
Yeah, they're not going anywhere this year. Because it's not just that like, okay, well, next year you can come back. You can, if you don't like Colt McCoy, you can find somebody. The cap room is being eaten up by him, whether he plays or not. And so it does almost sentence America already to a dismal year next year. You're already talking about 24 if you're an Arizona Cardinal fan.
Well, it's not even, but like the cap hits are pretty modest in 22 and 23. It's 24 when you have a 50 million cap number as well. So, next year you wonder, it's just, you build up they just need to nail the next few drafts. And like, there's just no evidence to suggest that they can. Like you look at their history of their first round picks, other than Murray, it's been a complete nightmare. And, Isaiah Simmons, I know he's a Kansas City kid and probably be okay in a different scheme. Zaven Collins, hasn't done much of anything. Byron Murphy has struggled at times, although he's had a better, they just had in order for them to have any success, it has to be like a 2016, 2017 Saints draft. Like that's the only way out of this. And it's just like, do you really think that they can do that reliably? I just don't.
Well, who's playing quarterback?
Well, but I'm even thinking about 24. Like
okay,
23 is a Dunsky year for me, right? Like this roster stinks. The coaching staff doesn't look like it's gelling with the players very well. Murray's going to be out for, half the year probably. And if he does play, he's not going to be, his same self. And like what I fear is like you call next year a reset. Like I think the only way you can call next year a reset is if you dump Murray's money into 23. And I don't know because when the Niners signed Garoppolo, it's kind of another similar thing. And Garoppolo tears his knee up in 18. Luckily for the Niners, they front loaded the heck out of that deal. So in 18, they could just suck. And then like Garoppolo's money was fairly smooth after that. And that was why they were able to build a team. But this is like you're wasting a cheap year on him with no Murray playing.
Well, and I think you're absolutely right, Eric. And what they need to do is renegotiate the deal, front load more money, put roster bonus, take a big cap hit next year on a year that they don't plan on going anywhere. And nobody wants to do that because the head coach and general manager are going to get fired. They've got to try to win games to show that they still belong. But I think that is, Jeff, the future is I haven't figured out why teams like the Jaguars. I do like what the Jaguars are doing, but Doug Peterson just took a page out of the playbook that he was a part of in Kansas City, where Scott Pioli, while they weren't winning, left the Kansas City Chiefs with a lot of cap room, and immediately Andy Reid and John Dorsey spent it all. They immediately and listen, and they went 11-5, and they were in the playoffs, and they've had a winning record every year under Andy Reid, and they ultimately got Patrick Mahomes and won a championship. So you can't fault it. They clearly created a winning culture. But that's why I really thought the team that would do it would be Bill Belichick when Brady left. I thought he would tank hard, front load everything, do whatever it took contract-wise to make it to where he was super cheap and then have a bunch of money to spend. The Raiders are the one team that did it back with, I think, Jack Del Rio was leaving. They had a bunch of cap room. They front-loaded everybody. Like when they got Rodney Hudson in free agency, his first year was like the biggest year. We see everybody else is always backloading it, planning on getting out early. But if you can front load it, you can still get out early, and teams don't ever want to use that cap room. No team's been better positioned, like Eric said, to do that. And bring Kyler Murray's money all forward. Just deal with it. The guaranteed money's spent. There's nothing you can do. So you might as well give it to him next year. Go cheap everywhere else on the team with all draft picks. Get as many draft picks, as many young guys as you can. Try to rebuild that, and maybe even grab another young quarterback in next year's draft. And then at least Murray comes back and he's much cheaper. But Jeff, no team will do that. Certainly the Cardinals will not be that forward thinking, right?
No. And teams don't do that because it's hard to convince your fans that you're really trying to do the right thing. I think what you're talking about is an interesting proposition and probably a pretty bright idea, but most people can't get their heads around that kind of an approach. And Herb Edwards tried this in Kansas City. He lasted all of 3 years doing it. He came in and said, "Let's tear it down. We can't win." And people said the team sucks. And all of a sudden, Todd Haley had his job 2 years later or 3 years later, whatever it was. And so, I think what Eric's suggesting does make sense. And I hadn't thought about it in that way, but it is a worthwhile move. You know that you're not going to have him for a year. You know you're going to not keep up with the Niners or the Seahawks. Even the Rams probably have a bounce back and become a little bit better of a team when they get some healthy players back. But I think that is probably the only thing that would make sense for them. But again, organizationally, by the way, really bad time to be on Hard Knocks. Organizationally, they're dysfunctional. And I don't think that they are going to be able to make that leap to do that kind of thing that would give them some hope going into 24.
Well, I feel like this is just another example in like, do you just move on more quickly from people in this league? I don't want to be that way, right? But like Keim's been there forever. And, he's gotten his chance. And like they did win last year. They went 11-6. They should have won the division. If they beat a dogged Seahawks team in week 18, they win the division. But then you play that listless playoff game. You have the Murray thing where Murray can't, his contract is very much like basically a signal that he's not like a team player or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I think that there's a little bit of racism and stupid stuff like involved in that, because no one says that about Kingsbury or Kime. But it's like, did they give all these three guys? Did they have kids to keep the marriage together? Like, what was it felt like it felt like it made no sense to anybody at the time to extend Kingsbury and Kime and Murray all at the same time. And unfortunately, like, now they're stuck, I think, paying a decent amount of coin for, like, all those contracts go until at least 27, 28.
Yeah. Yeah. No, they're like kind of stuck with each other, and I don't see the relationships getting a whole lot better there. It's going to be ugly in Arizona. I mean,
I'll tell you a quick story about the Cardinals front office. A friend of mine used to work there years ago. Bidwell obviously was the owner, and he was talking to front office, high-ranking front office person about how they went about scouting something and what was going on. He had just joined the organization, and he was a little bit frustrated about some of the things they were doing, their roster building and drafting free agents. And the guy told me, look, man, don't make too much noise. We're all getting paid here. It's going to be all right. I always think about that with the Cardinals. It's just like, everybody's getting paid there.
Yeah.
Everybody's getting paid. Nobody's rocking the boat.
Everything's good. Everything's good. You're listening to the Too Deep NFL podcast, proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, serving the entire Kansas City metro area from one end to the other. Gann Asphalt and Concrete is Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Consultations, they're free, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. You can find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Tell them you heard about them on the Too Deep podcast. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot, for no matter what your business is, whether it's repairs or starting from scratch. If you got parking lot needs, Gann Asphalt and Concrete can help you out. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. Tell them you heard about it on the Too Deep podcast. Baker Mayfield shocked the world. He certainly shocked me. Bringing the Rams back from absolutely dead in just a few minutes. It was great to see. Like, I wish no ill will on anyone. Sucked for the Raiders. Raider fans, I feel for you. If ever there seemed like a time where you could lean for the tape and get there, Eric, that was it. Baker Mayfield. How about Baker? We had a couple of people. Baker Mayfield to the Cardinals next year, right? He's on just a rest of the year deal with the Rams. Does Baker Mayfield still have potential to have a future in this league as a starting quarterback?
I don't think so. I don't. He was bad most of that game, wasn't he?
Yes, but he'd been there like literally like
2 days,
40 hours.
Yeah, I know, but like, he was bad in Carolina this year. Like, PJ Walker had way more success in Carolina than Baker did, right? Like,
but aren't you just falling victim to recency bias? I mean, he wasn't bad for the Cleveland Browns.
No, he wasn't. I thought, I would just. The problem is in this league, though, you have to be, if you're going to make a veteran salary, you have to be a lot better than what Baker even was in Cleveland, right? So, people are always going to be, he might have a pop-up year like Geno Smith has had. That'd be great. But I just don't see him as a long-term answer. Now, the Rams he might be the starter for the Rams next year, because Stafford might retire, right? McVay might retire. Like, there's a good chance he's a starter there. I just don't see Mayfield. And again, I was fun to watch him play. Like, I was really high on him coming out of Oklahoma. Like, I think he has some potential, obviously, but like, I just think in this league, like, they're always going to try to replace quarterbacks like Baker Mayfield.
He tries so hard, right, at the non-football part of it, right?
Yes.
The headbutting guys without helmets, like jumping right into an advertising campaign before he'd ever won. That's one of the things that I think has been pretty impressive about Patrick Mahomes. When he wasn't starting, he wasn't doing ads. He got the starting job. He did a couple, but it wasn't like the way you see Patrick Mahomes everywhere. He let himself go out and play and earn it before he was, plastered everywhere as the front of a full company ad campaign. Baker seems to not get that part of it, which speaks to why you would not get the quarterback part. But Jeff, I actually do think we'll see Baker Mayfield I don't project like Ryan Tannehill second stop kind of success, but that guy who kind of pops up and you go, wow, Elvis Gerbach starting a playoff game for the Baltimore Ravens. Wow. I'm trying to think of somebody else. I don't want to say Don Strock with the Browns.
That Steve Young used to call Elvis Gerbach L.
What'd you say?
Steve Young used to call Elvis Gerbach L when he was his backup.
Yeah.
He probably should have finished it off and just said OL.
Yeah. I don't know, but can you see success for Baker on down the road?
I see an opportunity. I think that 2-minute drive allowed him to showcase some positives. I had a scout tell me that because Sean McVay and Kevin Stefanski are both West Coast guys, that he probably had some comfort level with the terminology, because that doesn't really change a lot from West Coast team to West Coast team. And really you're not seeing the same kind of complexity in defenses at that point in the game. Teams are a little more predictable in what they're going to run. But it still was impressive. I mean, what he did was something that nobody would have predicted for him coming out of Carolina after being waived. I think the bigger thing with him is it's less about talent, it's more about personality. And I think somebody just made the point of why didn't the Houston Texans pick him up? Yeah, because Baker Mayfield's there's a lot to take on. I mean, he's proven in this league to have to be a bit of a drama queen. He can get he thinks highly of himself. As this guy told me, he thinks he's John Elway out there, and he's not. And really, this guy made a great comparison that he's a lot like Ryan Fitzpatrick as far as talent level. And the difference between the two of them is that Ryan Fitzpatrick is beloved everywhere he goes because he's very humble, very much a fit into the locker room type person, and he's not a big personality. So that really is going to determine what happens to Baker long term. Is can he be the kind of guy he was in college when he was chip on his shoulder, trying to prove himself, doing everything possible to earn his way, and not be this guy who came into the league like, hey, I'm Baker Mayfield, like, give me the job, give me the commercials, let me talk trash to the reporters and tell them how stupid they are. Like, that stuff doesn't play well. So if he wants a second chance, I think that's what's going to get him that, just being able to humble himself.
The reason, by the way, Temecula Hound Dog says, like, why didn't the Texans put a claim on him? Like, Baker Mayfield isn't the kind of quarterback that the Texans need, right? Like, the Texans are taking moonshots right now until they get one, right? Like, Mayfield, we've already seen this distribution, have we not? Like, we know the average is about a little bit below average, and his highs are decent and his lows are treacherous, right? Like, I don't know. It feels interesting. Interesting question.
I think it is too, and I get Houston saying, "Hey, we want to get that number one pick, and we want to take our shot at the top quarterback on the board." Which, by the way, I pulled up one. Todd McShay's mock draft came out. They've got Bryce Young going to the Texans.
Yeah,
right. I mean, I don't think you want now Bryce Young, by all accounts, seems to be the all around everything that Baker Mayfield's not. The leader, the get along with everybody, all that kind of stuff. And he is already on commercials, right? He's already in the Heisman house doing commercials.
He's got more commercials than Joe Burrow.
Heisman house and Diet Dr. Pepper. He's doing Diet Dr. Pepper. But I think the problem is, Baker Mayfield isn't going to play the role of Alex Smith very well, right? He's not going to be a mentor in that point. But I mean, I do like the quarterbacks of late have not been that good, right? Have we noticed that? Like, does anybody see it in Kenny Pickett this year? I don't. Bailey Zappi was a thing for about 5 minutes. Trevor Lawrence hasn't hit the ground running. Zach Wilson is a complete no-show. Trey Lance, and then got hurt. Justin Fields can run, right? Mac Jones can hand off. That's last year's. That's the top of the food chain for last year's class.
Yeah, 2020 class is pretty good, though.
Burrow, Tua, Herbert. Yeah, it is. And Hurts.
And Hurts.
Yeah. With Jordan
That's
Love.
the MVP of the league, Soren.
Yeah. Okay, but let's go to the 2019. Kyler Murray at 1, Daniel Jones at 6, Dwayne Haskins at 15.
Drew Lock at 40. Don't forget Drew Lock.
2018. Baker Mayfield at 1, Sam Darnold at 3. Josh Allen was at 7. Josh Rosen.
Lamar Jackson was at 32.
I mean, it just speaks to the volatile nature of drafting quarterbacks.
Yeah, but I will take a step back though, Soren. Not all those quarterbacks have been great. I'll even go back to 17. Trubisky wasn't great, but the Bears made the playoffs with him twice. Watson, Mahomes, both pretty good quarterbacks. 18, Mayfield was a 500 quarterback with the Cleveland Browns, who were previously 1-31. So, like, drafting quarterbacks is still a successful move. It's just that there are levels, right? You draft a young quarterback, you can be okay with him. The other question is, how many of those guys truly end up being franchise guys? And I think I'm afraid that, like, we've been spoiled by the last decade, right? Where for a long time we had 8 guys that were unquestioned starters for their teams and amazing players that were just like shuffling the deck different times at different places. And like, maybe we're just expecting too much out of these young quarterbacks.
I think it's more so, and I've had GMs tell me this, that concern about getting stuck with a quarterback that you don't believe in with a huge price tag is a cost that people aren't as excited about paying anymore. And that there is more of a belief that the quarterback isn't everything. That having what Philadelphia had with Jalen Hurts or having what the Niners have had with their quarterbacks is a much better place to be, just because you don't want to be upside down with a Carson Wentz. Now, Jared Goff is working out in Detroit, but there is this belief now that you don't know what you're getting with these guys, and there are way more moves to be made now. You could be way more aggressive because of the salary cap, because of the trade deadline. You can build your roster faster and not be stuck. It used to be back in the day, you had to get a guy because you weren't going to have many moves to make elsewhere. Now there's a lot of moves you can make to improve your team, and the Eagles proved it, winning a championship 5 years ago and being back having a chance this year with a whole different quarterback.
I'm going to say this again, and I go back to like watching Josh Freeman get thrown out on the field for the Minnesota Vikings, Baker Mayfield. And I thought, I'm watching this all over again until the last 3 minutes of that game. Baker Mayfield to be wise to sign up to be the backup quarterback to Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or one of those guys and take a year in a situation that's really good and look at that situation and watch that guy and how he carries himself. I don't think he'll do it, but I think that would be the best case for him. Is there a best case for the Dolphins, Jeff? They've now dropped a couple to a very good team in the 49ers on the road. They had to go to the Chargers. They stayed out in California in between those two games. 23-17 was the final score, but we didn't see a whole lot out of Tua. Is the shine kind of off this Dolphins offense, off Tua? Are people figuring out? Is it Tyreek Hill now kind of limping around? That was a problem. And there were rumblings in Kansas City when they traded him that they thought the heel injury was a chronic injury, and that was a precursor to an Achilles tendon injury on down the road. I don't want to. I've no one said that down in Miami, and they were icing his shin. They were icing the front part of his leg during the game. So, but is the bloom off the rose already with the Dolphins before they can even get to the postseason?
Yeah, and you saw this coming. Look, this was always going to be a tough stretch for them with the Niners, the Chargers, and the Bills, all on the road, all tough places to play, all teams with really good quarterbacks, or at least really good defenses, combinations. They all have their strengths. And so when you're Miami and your defense hasn't been great all year, your offensive line is taking some hits, especially at tackle. As you said, Tyreek Hill's banged up now. That's not a great formula for Tua Tagovailoa to have success. And what you're seeing is a quarterback who needs to have the machine running at a high level to be a high-level quarterback, which is why we had the conversations earlier in the year about extend him long-term, money, whatever, franchise, quarterback. He still has to prove that, because the last 2 games have shown you that when things start going bad around him, he's a different player. And he's had some tough interceptions and some bad throws. And I think it's because he knows that he's got to make some plays here. And defenses have figured out that, okay, Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill are really fast, but they're also really slight of build. Tyreek's a thicker guy, but they're smaller guys. Let's get up. Let's be physical with them. Let's take away the timing. and take away the timing, Tua doesn't have a strong enough arm to be late with throws. He's got to have anticipation. He's got to have accuracy to make it work. And the Chargers did a great job of that with a beat up defense, just really being physical at the line of scrimmage and making them work for it. I mean, that's what they're going to see the rest of the season.
Tua, by the way, from Hawaii, played, and I'm trying to look. Tuscaloosa is right outside of Birmingham, right?
Yeah, warm weather town. Certainly.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I just wanted to see exactly how close he is to the ocean, like how far he's actually been away from water. It's halfway up Alabama, so it's not down. It's not that close to the water. But now he's in Miami, Saturday night in Buffalo.
He's 0-3 in games where it's below 50 degrees.
And
it's not even freezing.
Snow is coming.
I mean, my guy, that arm looked Palco-like on Sunday.
Yeah.
That wind up. I know he's left-handed. I'm being like, a little bit facetious, but it looked rough, right? Like it looked rough. Yeah. And I don't know, again, to all of our listeners that are in Kansas that finally have legal sports betting. In Ohio, we get it in 17 days. Go place a bet on the Dolphins to miss the playoffs. I'm just saying. Plus money. It looks
missed the playoffs.
At Buffalo, Packers, at Pats, and then the Jets. That's the stretch run. I mean, and they've dropped two.
I think they won the last two.
Yeah, I think that they might. I wouldn't put it past them.
That's like me hedging on the Chargers a little bit, boys.
Let's stay on that game. The Bills flirted around with Odell Beckham Jr. They didn't pull the trigger on that. They did pull the trigger on Cole Beasley, which they worked out their differences. Can only imagine, it was, vaccination and him always talking about vaccination and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I'm sure they were like, enough of you, dude. You're more of a distraction than we can handle. Is this a sign that there's an issue with the offense in Buffalo? And listen, Brad was on here and he was talking about Josh Allen being down. There's a report out there about that. I texted my buddy Sal Capaccio, who does sidelines for the Bills and covers them, and I said, "Hey, is there anything to that?" He was having platelet injections in his elbow, which is true, and which has been part of his rehab. He said he's been a full go at practice every day. So and Brad had a nice call on the Bills a couple weeks ago in our chat room. If you're joining us via the podcast, Brad's one of the regulars there in the podcast. But Sal just told me he's been a full go at practice, so he's not expected to miss this game. But what do you make of them going out and grabbing Cole Beasley at this point in the year?
Well, it feels like there's concern about how explosive they can be offensively right now. I'm not saying he's going to go out there and be Tyreek Hill, but I watched them play, and they seem to be missing something in their passing game. And maybe Cole Beasley offers that, another security blanket. But when Josh Allen's going back to pass, and the Jets are a different beast, granted, it just feels
Williams
off.
Is a different beast.
Yeah. It just feels a little bit off. And it feels like they're searching for something that once they get past Stephon Diggs, and Gabe Davis hasn't been as consistent as you would have thought this season. And Isaiah McKenzie really has not been what they were hoping he would be. And Jamison Crowder went down. So that's three different receivers outside of Stephon Diggs that there are questions there. I feel like they're loading up on offense, trying to figure, okay, we don't have Von Miller now. That calculus of him closing out games and being able to do things. Maybe our defense is more vulnerable now than we want to be. And we got to get back to having a little more electricity in our passing game, because you look at their numbers. And again, part of this is Josh Allen being banged up. They haven't thrown for over 250 yards in a game in the last month. And so they're playing a lot more conservatively offensively. They've run it well, which has been a good thing for them. But Josh Allen's been a big part of that run game. So I think a lot of what they're looking at here is we need more weapons. And we need more weapons because we're going to have to outscore people.
The Jets lost back-to-back. Eric, real quick, the Jets lost back-to-back games to the Jets and Vikings earlier, and that was a stretch. That was the second and third game of a 3-game stretch where Josh Allen threw 6 interceptions. He's only thrown 1 interception in the last 5 games. He's also thrown 7 touchdowns in it. Is their offense in a wall?
I think so. I mean, the big one that so Jeff pointed something out that I think it's very astute. They wanted Isaiah McKenzie to be Cole Beasley, right? The get a bucket wide receiver that's been so valuable. I mean, Peter King gave him a All-Pro vote in 2020, if I remember correctly, because he was so dependable there. And the other player that hasn't, since they went to Kansas City, that hasn't been any good is Dawson Knox, right? Like, I think Knox has been a guy that, like, we saw in the AFC divisional round last year. We saw against the Chiefs early in the year, and he has not been a dependable tight end. So they need a wide receiver to get a bucket for them every once in a while, right? Right now, their way of getting a first down when they absolutely need it is to run a quarterback sweep to Josh Allen. And they know that that's not sustainable. And so, yeah, they lost to the Jets. They lost to the Vikings. The Vikings loss was fluky. The Jets one was even a little fluky as well. But, like, their offense is not scary right now. It's good. It's not scary. They almost lost to the Lions on Ford Field in Detroit too. Like, they need a guy that's a down payment type wide receiver. And I think Beasley at least offers a promise of that if he can return to his form that he played like when he was there.
I mean, I do like that. I think Brett makes a good point. Still waiting for Nyheim Hines to break out. It does kind of feel like they're just like, grab anybody, right? Yeah. It's their version of
James Cook?
Well, or the Rams grabbed Von Miller. They're looking for that, last year in season. And I thought they had somebody else that maybe they grabbed along the way.
Well, they got John Brown back, right?
They brought John Brown back too. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm just saying that, it's just like, is there a plan to this, or is it literally just grab anybody? Let's grab, this feels almost more like a baseball team loading up with veteran bats at the trade deadline to make sure that they've got a solid bench. I mean, I don't know. It does feel.
Yeah. Well, I think Emmanuel Sanders last year, what gave them something that they're not getting out of their third receiver. And that's why I think that it's more when you're going to get John Brown, you're going to get Cole Beasley, you're trying to find somebody who can be that, who can be an effective, reliable, a consistent third option for you. Because again, when I watch Josh Allen go back, I've watched Josh Allen play a lot, and I watched him earlier in the year, especially against Kansas City. The confidence he had in dropping back was like, I got so many options out here. I can do whatever I want to do. Like, he looks like a guy now who's, okay, somebody get open because they're doubling Stephon Diggs. I need somebody to make a play for me. And it's not the same.
Yeah, they're getting some of that too deep stuff, and like Eric said, they go to the run with Josh Allen. They did it in an important third down against the Jets on like 3rd and 7. They had it in the student body left in the game last week. Let's talk about the Cowboys. Dak Prescott. I'll let you guys comment because I've been known as a Dak detractor. I think he's a fine player, but you do not want Dak to have to win the game. Is he the reason why the Cowboys can't get by the Eagles, won't get by the Niners, Eric, in your opinion?
No, their expected points on offense and completion percentage above, like, all the advanced metrics have been favorable to Dak since he returned. I know he was terrible in week 1 before he got hurt, and he's terrible last week for the most part. But, like, on average, they've generally been okay. No, I think Dak, the problem with Dak is I don't know if he can string 4 straight games together. So if in that event, he probably can't win. Like, but this is a weak NFC, so he's not going to be the reason in this year, but I think most years he's the reason. Yeah.
Listen, he's not going to win anything close. I mean, if it's close and late, he's not delivering the goods.
I don't know about that. I mean, he's a damn good quarterback, man. I know he's not in the top group, but he's a damn good quarterback.
He's 19th in QBR. Jeff,
his interception per game rate is second only to Matt Ryan. So which he's thrown 8 interceptions in the last 3 games. And I think, as some people have noted, he's just not seeing the field very well, not seeing the defense very well. But I like Dak too. I think he is probably takes too much. Yeah, I think he gets.
I just am realistic about what he is.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. I think sometimes they act as if he's got Mahomes-like ability, and they try to run the offense that way. When in fact, it's the same thing with Zeke. They hand the ball to Zeke when Tony Pollard is the guy who gives you all the big plays. And so I think there's a lot of that goes on with Dak too, because Dak to me was a much better quarterback when he did more running. That's where he and Jalen Hurts separate for me, because Jalen Hurts can hurt you with his legs and tries to hurt you with his legs, where Dak has tried to become basically a pocket passer with not many weapons and not great field vision right now, which is a bad place to be. So I think it's more on Kellen Moore, the play caller, and the coaching staff and McCarthy to be able to sit down and say, hey, look, let's not try to be this 5,000-yard passing team. Let's take what is good for us, run the ball effectively, play action pass, throw it to Dalton Schultz, CeeDee Lamb a little bit, and play defense.
Yeah. I think that's a winning formula in the NFC, by the way, this year, right? Like if they play that way, they're facing the Eagles in the NFC title game, aren't they?
I think it is with the Niners with Brock Purdy. I think it was with the Eagles for the first half of the season, because I think that's what the Eagles were doing, right? But I do come back. I think Hurts has grown just within this season to where he goes out and now listen, we're watching him play from in front, and it's always easy, and he's making big plays in the passing game, but playing from in front is different than, okay, we're down 10, there's 7 to go. We got to go down and get points two in a row, and it's got to be quick. We haven't seen him do that yet. And so I think the Eagles recipe is to play from in front, but I think your point's a good one until about the last 4 or 5 weeks, where I feel like Jalen Hurts has taken his game up another level. All right. By the way, you're listening to the 2D podcast brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete. The Lions, Eric, your beloved
Tiger time.
Tiger time. What do you want to say? They're now a game away from 500. Dan Campbell about ready to bite the kneecaps off of the Coach of the Year award. What do you want to say about where the Lions sit right now?
If you know, you know. I look, it came together really nicely for them, right? Early in the season, they had some injuries. They had a tougher schedule than expected. A team like Seattle was playing better than you would have said early in the year. The Dolphins were better than we would have said early in the year. They ran into the Cowboys, got Dak back before they played them. And the splits for Jared Goff when Amon-Ra St. Brown plays and when he doesn't are like they're a bad offense when he doesn't play. They're a great offense when he plays. So my view on the Lions was if all these things went right, they could be a pretty good team. And in the first half of the season, a lot of those things didn't go right, and they weren't. And they lost some close games, Minnesota, Miami. Now they've gotten a little luckier in the second half. But they're also just a damn good team. They controlled Minnesota. Their weaknesses, obviously in the passing game, Justin Jefferson set a Minnesota Vikings receiving record on Sunday. But they get rushed on the passer. This weekend against the Jets, it's going to be a really tough matchup for them, right? Because the Jared Goff has been amazing when clean. He's not as good when under pressure. The Jets, if Quinnen Williams plays, are going to be able to put heat on him. The Lions have not run the ball that well in the past few weeks, and they're going to have to, I think, if they go on the road outdoors, over the next few weeks. So, look, will they go over 6.5 wins? You have to hope so. And then the bets all win. They're 9-4 against the spread. They've covered 6 consecutive games. Dan Campbell in his career as the coach of the 20-10 against the spread since joining the Lions. So this is just a team that's overcome expectations a lot, and I'm really thrilled that it's come together nicely for them.
By the way, I do like Jeff, and I can't remember if you had kind of an off-the-wall pick. I do like the celebration of the Lions for Eric Eager, who currently sit 9th when 7 teams make the playoffs right now. I wish, if anybody had taken the team that's currently sitting 5th and in the playoffs, that nobody was giving any credit to, the Commanders.
I bet the Commanders over.
This guy did. This guy.
So did I.
You didn't have him in the playoffs.
I have bets on them making the playoffs. I have a TikTok of
when
me saying
we did our predictions
to make the playoffs.
We did our predictions. You did not. I don't think you had the Commanders. Maybe I'm wrong. Jeff, we're sticking with the Lions. We won't get into the Commanders.
Oh, sure. In your prediction, I bet them, but yeah, okay. Their season win total is 7.5.
Yeah, that's 7.5. I have the Lions over. I have the Commanders over too. So I'm looking forward to cashing those very soon. Tell me, Jeff, are you believing the Lions at the Jets? That's a salty game, no doubt. But then at Carolina, Chicago at home, and at Green Bay, you know what the Lions' way of doing things would be? Beat the Jets,
Yeah. Yeah.
beat Carolina,
Yep.
and then fall at home to the Bears in front of their own fan base,
Yep.
and then of course
Lose
lose to Jordan Love
Yeah.
in Green Bay. How does come on? You grew up there. How does
That's
this end
right.
for the Lions?
I've seen that script many a times. But I'm with Eric on this. I feel like this team I'm impressed with a couple of things. One is that they've kept fighting for Dan Campbell. And this is the second straight year. Last year, they were 0-10-1, and they won, 3 of their last 5 games, whatever it was. And this year, they were 1-6, and they still kept fighting, and they've won, 5 of their last 6 games. The defense is to me, has turned this whole thing around for them. They're still at the bottom of the rankings, but they've only allowed 23 points, I think, over 23 points once in those 5 wins they've had. So I think Aaron Glenn figured some things out, their defensive coordinator, and stopped trying to play as if he had Deion Sanders and Charles Woodson playing corner for him. They've been a little more pragmatic on that side of the football. And Jared Goff somebody mentioned it here, he's been on a tear. I mean, nobody talks about it, but he's 10 touchdowns, 1 interception over the last 6 games, and 33-9 over the last 18 games. I mean, ever since they fired Anthony Lynn as their offensive coordinator and gave that job to Brian Johnson, he's been on fire. So I think they're good enough to beat the Jets. And if Quinnen Williams, it sounds like I don't know if he practiced yet for the Jets this week.
Not yet.
That calf injury. So
if
he's not playing.
Chris Jones, calves are rough.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is the defense is the question mark. And you're right, they are playing better. And thanks to Goff for helping my fantasy team out, because it's been a nice grab coming down the stretch for a guy that's had quarterback problems all year long. Thank you. I'll second that. Is Campbell the coach of the year, though? I'll go first on this one. No. And anyone who's heard my radio show will know that the coach of the year is Nick Sirianni, or it is McDermott. Winners are coaches of the year. Like, this is the easy part, right? Going from turd to respectable is the easy part, and way too often and Dan Campbell might earn that next year by taking the Lions to a 14-3 record. But I'll say no. Eric, is it coach of the year for you?
No, you're right. Sirianni's the favorite too, by the way. Campbell's second favorite, but he's like 5. He's an underdog by a mile. The thing is, I posted this from the Sumer Sports account, by the way, at Sumer Sports on Twitter. Sirianni, through 4th down decisions, timeout usage, delay a game avoidance, and 2-point conversions, has added 0.6 of a win to the Eagles' ledger this year. Campbell's actually second, McDermott is third, and John Harbaugh's fourth. So it's all the smart coaches, right, that are doing the good things there. Campbell, we know that Campbell has, as who says Penei Sewell, he's got some balls on him, right? But like Sirianni has empowered Shane Steichen, has empowered Jonathan Gannon, has empowered Jalen Hurts to be great. And then on top of that, they have 19 4th down conversions this year, the Eagles. That's coach of the year.
What was the list of coaches added value?
It was Sirianni, Campbell, McDermott, and John Harbaugh.
Okay. Where was Andy Reid, by the way?
He's top 10. He's not bad at these things.
Interesting. I was just curious. Where's Belichick?
Belichick is dead last.
Yeah, that's amazing how things have changed. Jeff, I did want to get your thoughts on this. Is Dan Campbell, you were up there at Lions camp, is he as meathead and what we saw? Is there a cerebral part? Eric just gave data that says, yes, there's a very cerebral part. What's your impression of Campbell when you see him away from the cameras?
I think he's really smart. I think he's, and I think it's interesting that a lot of I don't want to call it shtick, because I think that's who he is when he says some of this stuff that sounds really stupid or just comical. But that's gone away in the last 3 or 4, 8 weeks. Like, I haven't heard anybody quoting him saying something weird and having fun at his expense. I think he plays down. I think as a coach once told me, he plays down so everybody else can play up. And that's the kind of guy he is, where he's going to be one of the guys. He's going to push and motivate. But end of the day, no matter how you want to classify it, like I said, these guys have played for him. And I can tell you, I've been around a lot of teams over my 20, 30 some years of covering pro football. And I can tell you that these are the kind of teams that quit. Like when teams are 1-6, when they're 0-10, they pack it in. It's time for the offseason, and they are believing what he's selling. So he's not my coach of the year. I agree Sirianni's the guy, but he's definitely, clear-cut number 2.
All right, what are we looking for this week? Week 15, game, a matchup, anything in particular, Eric, that you're watching this week?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to tomorrow night's game. San Francisco at Seattle. Obviously, San Francisco with a win can tie up that division with a month to go, which is big. Seattle needs, this is part of my, I hope Detroit Lions make the playoffs fandom. But, if Seattle drops another game, then you're talking about, a lost season in a year where they had a real chance to do something, especially with how well Geno Smith's played.
All right, Jeff?
Bills, Dolphins. I looked at the way the Bills beat up on Mike White. I think it could very easily be that kind of a game for Tua. It feels as if the Bills defense is trying to prove a point about not having Von Miller and still being a difference-making defense. So, I said they get the bye because I think they went out. And I think that this game sets a tone for that because they got the Bears next and then the big matchup with the Bengals after that.
This game, if the Raiders hadn't crapped in their hat on Thursday night against Baker Mayfield and the boys, would be a lot more intriguing because the Raiders would be right there in the mix with the Patriots. But Bill Belichick is going to take on a protege. And when was the last time we've seen that? Does it go back to Mangenius against the Pats?
Patricia beat him in
yeah,
the third game.
He did.
On Sunday Night Football.
So,
I think Bill O'Brien. He played against Bill O'Brien.
Bill O'Brien beat him
and
in
also
19
and
as
Vrabel.
well.
Yeah,
And Vrabel.
It doesn't happen often because he doesn't usually have good coaching protege.
Yeah.
The guy doesn't get to coach enough years to play Belichick.
And by the way, Vrabel never coached under him, did he?
He didn't. No, he didn't.
No.
I
He
mean,
went to Ohio State and then down to Texas.
Yeah, no doubt Belichick impacted his career, as a player and impacted how he coaches. I mean, there's a lot of Belichick.
We remember the last time that McDaniel played Belichick, it was the beginning of the end, right? They won that 4:00 game in Denver. He was running around the stands, high five. They're wearing those, poop brown jerseys, and they go 6-0 with Kyle Orton.
Never won again.
And they barely never won again. So maybe this is the beginning of the beginning for McDaniel, unlike the last time, which is the beginning of the end.
Yeah, I like to see what is the worst coach, you said, according to added value, and Bill Belichick. Where
added value on decisions. He's still, right. I mean, yeah,
he's game planning and all that, but on decisions. By the way, where's Josh McDaniel land on that?
Top 10. He's done okay.
Okay, interesting. All right, that's going to do it for us here on the 2D podcast. Remember, you can always catch us live if you're catching us via the podcast. Wednesday nights at 9 o'clock, we stream the podcast live. And you can be a part of the conversation. A lot of folks in the chat room, a lot of great comments here tonight. Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook. You can make the comments there. And, of course, we want to thank our fine sponsor, GAN Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot, free consultations, no commissions, in-house crew. That's right, it's their employees. Every project comes with a written warranty. If you've got any kind of parking lot need for your business, no matter how big it is, no matter how small it is, GAN Asphalt and Concrete can take care of you. Call them today at 816-484-3338. Tell them you heard about them on the 2D podcast. Find them online at ganasphalt.com. So for Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, Eric Eager from Sumer Sports, my name is Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us here on the